Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We have 3 game sevens, 2 tonight, 1 on Wednesday. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss also the elimination of the Nashville Predators, who lose to the Dallas Stars. And we skipped over the Calgary Flames, who lost on the weekend. We'll talk about them as well. Russ, start us off with the pre-show.
Okay, so interesting pre-show in the sense that about a month and a half ago, a publisher who I've written for sold their business. And so a new guy came in, wanted me to update some books. So one of the books that I'm updating is Baseball's Best Rookies. So I just got done updating that about a few weeks ago. So I dug into Bryce Harper because I wanted to give a better representation of Bryce Harper in that book. So I did that. And the interesting thing about it was, so digging into Bryce Harper and his career, I found that even going back to the College World Series, where he was in like a Division II World Series, when he was playing with the Las Vegas team, he got kicked out for balls and strikes, arguing balls and strikes. And so this is something that's always been in his DNA. And I remember after looking at that, I was talking of all people to my veterinarian, because I've been at the vet lately with my pets a lot. And he's a Phillies fan. He asked me about Bryce Harper, and I started telling him about, his legendary temper and the fact that it goes all the way back to even his college days. And when Philly signed, when they signed him, they didn't really talk about any of that. And I felt like that all got glossed over until last night. And last night he got ejected. I want to say about the 4th, 5th inning, something like that. And Jake Arrieta took exception to it, the Phillies pitcher. So post game, he sort of called him out. He goes, I really needed Bryce there, yada, yada, yada. I don't know why he would say it on April 22nd. Like, if it's June, July, maybe, it's part of the season that counts a little more. Or maybe this is his way of sort of like telling Bryce, you can't keep getting ejected. I'm not sure. But now he's, caused a little something between the two players. This is something Arrieta can never win, because Bryce Harper is going to be there for 12 more years after this year with that big contract. So now, of course, the media is sort of turning on Arrieta a bit. Me as a Met fan, I'm just laughing, but I'm not shocked, because this is something Bryce Harper's done. He got ejected 3 times last year.
Yeah, and we'll talk about a player sort of losing his cool in a minute or two when we're talking about the Washington-Carolina series. But yeah, but that's that. And it's funny, because the complete 180-degree antithesis of Bryce Harper is Mike Trout. And I was watching a little bit of the Yankees Angels game last night before I fell asleep. The guy is just class. He doesn't say one thing out of place. He just goes out and is one of the best players in the game, if not the best. But nobody hears about him because he's on the second team in Los Angeles behind the Dodgers, and the Angels suck. So
Mike, he lives a half hour from me. I don't hear about him. He literally just goes fishing every day. Like, he is a very just normal guy, other than he's the best player in baseball.
Yeah. So, okay, let's start. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019.
I'm Peter Tessier in morning Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology. It's about 72 degrees and sunny here. And
I'm Michael Agello, prepared to be morning tomorrow, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Let's start with the 2 games that were played last night. First, the early game. Washington goes to the PNC Arena in Raleigh, hopefully to finish off the Carolina Hurricanes. It does not happen. 5-2 win for the Hurricanes over the Caps, forcing a Game 7 on Wednesday. The thing that I took from this game, Russ, is early on I thought the Caps were on. They bounced back after the Hurricanes had scored the tying goal, and Ovechkin scores this unbelievable goal to put them in the lead. But then as the game went along, it's almost like they tried to sit on that 1-goal lead and wait for Carolina to make the mistake, and they didn't really make the mistake. And we saw that disputed goal in the 3rd period that obviously Ovechkin thought should have counted, but it didn't. And after that, I thought the Caps and specifically Ovechkin lost their cool. There were a couple instances where Tom Wilson took a run at somebody. He missed, but if he would have connected, I mean, that's just stupid because you have a game 7 and you're gonna get suspended for a hit in retaliation with 3 minutes left to go in the third period.
Nobody ever said Tom Wilson was well thought out, Mike.
Him and Nazem Kadri should buy a cafe together or something. But and
to be fair, I was speaking at a speaking engagement last night at the Flyers fan club, but I was keeping an eye on the game, and then I watched when I got home and I watched the replay and such. And this doesn't shock me. This was a game where I think the Caps just felt like once they didn't have the lead, it was sort of slipping away. So then they just wanted to just sort of send a message. And I think after Ovechkin didn't get his goal, which shouldn't have got counted, he pushed the goalie in the net. I mean, that is, it's called pitchforking. It's done a lot. And I think they made the right call. But that was just enough to light the fuse for him. Yeah. And then and I forget the Canes player's name. I brought him up on the show a few times, a big Finnish kid, Mekalainen, something like that. And so he slashes him, and he doesn't bite at it. So then Ovechkin gets really pissed off, and I think it was less than 2 minutes to go in the game. So when he got the penalty, they basically kicked him out, and he starts clapping. And so it's like, you know what? The interesting thing about the Capitals is they almost seemed like they were blowing off steam. Now, it's always dangerous when you do this to a team that is young and has nothing to lose like Carolina. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the Caps don't feel like they're really in danger. I don't know if I feel like they're really in danger. Of course, it's a game 7. Anything can happen. Yeah. But I do feel like now with their experience and everything else, they feel like, you know what? Yeah, this one got away. We'll just send a message. And I think we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's Manolane, and I just looked it up. And, Manolane, thank you. Yeah, and Peter, if there's a year that a team that is favored should think that they should be careful about assuming that they're going to win the series, it's this year, because as we were talking about before we started recording, this is the year of the upset. This is the year of the underdog. Yeah. If it breaks right with some of these game 7s, you could have every first and second place team in every division losing. Hockey pools and brackets are being shot with this.
Oh, they're being obliterated. I mean, there are people who have no reason winning pools about to win them this year. And that's kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, I didn't watch all of the Carolina game last night. I had to go out and do something for my kid, and then kind of went to the gym and came back, and I heard about this whole Ovechkin goal controversy and stuff. And I think what's interesting about that is the pressure of that series is starting to get to them, right? But an interesting thing, no team that has won the Stanley Cup since 2012 has ever had to they've always had to play 1 7-game series before
getting to the final,
before they've won. So you got to go through hell before you get to heaven, right? And that's part and parcel of it.
Well, yeah, I think obviously the Caps should be favored going into Game 7. They are the incumbent Stanley Cup champions, but and I'm not the biggest Peter Mrazek fan, so he hasn't exactly been stellar in the series. He was okay yesterday. And it doesn't look like they're going to get Ferland back or Svechnikov back. No. Those are two big players for them, especially two bigger players against a big lineup that's going to want to push you around, especially in a game 7. But that being said, they're Cinderella. They've been Cinderella all year. Are they going to do the surge at the Capital One Arena if they win? No. If they win,
no. They were going to do it. They would have done it yesterday.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think you do a surge in the playoffs until you win the big thing. And if you want to do it if you win the Stanley Cup on away ice, you can do it. You won the cup.
All right.
But you're going to be too busy parading around with the cup.
Right.
Yes. And if you're Alex Ovechkin, you'd be too busy drinking vodka. Okay. Yeah. The other game, and we'll talk about who won it, and then we'll talk about who lost it. 2-1 victory for the Dallas Stars. They shockingly beat the Nashville Predators in 6 games on an overtime goal by John Klingberg. The Stars move on to play the St. Louis Blues in the second round. The Predators go home, and a lot of questions now will be focused on what the Predators do in the offseason. I'll start with the Stars. Russ, the amazing transformation that I say, and it's sort of understated because, everybody talks about the Islanders going from 31st in goals against to number 1 with Leonard, and that is attributed to Barry Trotz. But you have to give a ton of credit to Jim Montgomery. He made a team that they were the poster child for offense first, defense when they, never. And because they under Ken Hitchcock, who was a coach who stressed defense, and Montgomery comes in and he gets Sagan and Radulov and Ben to buy in to play defense. Their numbers went down significantly in terms of offense and goals against during the regular season, but they prepared them for what normally happens in the playoffs, and they beat Nashville at their own game.
They did. This was the reason I was surprised that the Rangers went with David Quinn over Montgomery. I mean, it's not that Quinn's a bad coach, just that I thought Montgomery was the best coach out there. But again, I think it was because Montgomery wanted to be out in the Midwest. That was the main reason. So Dallas got lucky because of proximity. They did get a great coach. You don't win those championships and have teams in the Frozen Four all the time without knowing something about hockey and teaching young players. And that's what he had there. A lot of still creating players. You look at guys like Rupe Hintz. We've talked about him on the show. Now he's shining in the playoffs. Even Jason Dickinson, I saw really flying around there, doing well, even trying to get like a touch up on an icing in the overtime, which I felt was really something Nashville was hurting with, was their speed. Dallas had some younger players in the lineup, guys like Heiskanen, and you know what? Nashville got tired out. Nashville, we keep hearing about these big, heavy teams, and even, no offense to Anthony Stewart, who was on the midday show today, talking about the goal, like, look at these big players, with these passes. And I don't care if they're big or they're small. It doesn't matter. It really matters about the player. Big players are nice, but Mike could talk about Freddie Gauthier all day and how him being big isn't helping the Leafs. So it's obviously more than that. But they have a lot of skill, and Radulov did make a second great pass on that, and Klingberg's always had a great shot. So that did in Nashville, but I felt like the speed factor and the pace did in Nashville a little bit. Certainly wasn't Rinne. I don't think anything was really
not in that game. Maybe other games.
The other, yeah, you definitely could point to them for the others. But now Nashville has to sort of look at things and say, honestly, when we were talking the other day, and I said I felt like they probably have to move Yossi, now that's becoming a prevailing thing because Yossi is going to ask for top-of-the-market money.
Yeah.
He should. And he should, because he hasn't been paid that. I don't know what he's currently getting. I don't.
It's a less than 5.
Yeah, so if he's getting less than 5, now he's looking for 10.5, 11.
Yeah, he's making 4. He's making exactly. 4. And Russ, I mean, I said it yesterday, and then John Shannon said it today. He thinks it's more likely that they trade PK because PK is marketable, and Yossi's been there from the very beginning. They have a history of re-signing their guys, and not to say that Subban's done anything wrong there. It's just he's making $9 million, and they need to make room. And if they can't get rid of guys like Kyle Turris, which is going to be tough with $6 million for 4 more years, there are going to be some decisions that have to be made. But just to go back to Dallas for a second, and then Peter, you can go. I saw Dickinson. I saw Hintz. I saw a couple of their young guys play with Texas in the Calder Cup final last year, and you could see those players coming. That is the trend in this league. You have to keep the engine moving and keep bringing those young, inexpensive players. And you could see Hintz last year, and I said, this guy's an NHLer. He shouldn't be here. Just like Andreas Janssen was with the Marlies and won their version of the Conn Smythe in the AHL, and he scored 20 goals this year in the NHL. You have to keep the engine moving. You have to keep those players coming, and they made a difference for Dallas in the playoffs. But go ahead, Peter.
No, Mike, I think there's some interesting things about Nashville, but I just want to piggyback on what you're saying with Dallas. I think one of the things that's come out of this series is it's the Heiskanen coming out party. If you didn't know about him already, wow,
yes,
it's good. And Klingberg had a great game last night too. It's like Dallas seems to have figured some things out, and since the infamous rant from the president, and they scraped in. That's fine, but once you're in, and then you can see what you can do, and they're starting to feel it. And Bishop, Bishop's the goalie no one talked about all season, and he's definitely, he made his impact last night. They were outshot, and they've been outshot a few times in the series, and he was good. But in regards to Nashville, so Yossi's making $4 million next season, then he's a UFA, and PK's got 3 years left at $9 million.
Right.
So if you're out in the marketplace and you're looking for defense, this is a risk question, and I don't know the answer to it, but it should be a discussion if you're considering signing Erik Karlsson. You're going to be signing him for 7 years.
Right.
Is it riskier to sign him for 7 years at or around the same amount of money as PK, if you can even get him at that level? Or is it less risky? Or what's more risky? Signing Karlsson for 7 years at a $10 to $11 million a year term,
right?
Or giving up assets to get PK for 3 years at $9 million.
I think
if you're shopping for top flight defensemen, that should be one of the analyses you're doing right now.
Russ, go ahead.
I was going to say it's riskier to sign Karlsson, but I don't think I'm looking at cap friendly, and they have about $4 million in space, right? Yeah. So let's say you add that $4 million to Yossi, that's 8. You add what the cap goes up next year, that's 11. So if you say they kept everything the same, because they don't have RFAs and UFAs that are going to be a big deal, they would be fine. But basically what I'm saying is to keep Subban, it's not going to do much to the team. To keep Yossi, you're going to have to get rid of at least 2 players just to get other players in there to be able to sign him, because he's going to want 10 by 8.
Well, I mean, this year you're losing Simmons, you're losing Brian Boyle, you're losing Cody McLeod. That's between the 4 of them. That's about $7 million.
You got to fill spots.
Yeah,
right. But that's sort of offset by the fact that Ellis's new contract kicks in, and he's making almost $4 million more than he was last year. The drop off for after this year is Granlund's contract expires. That's $575, and that would accommodate for Yossi's increase if Yossi came in from around what Subban is making, and they have most of everybody else signed. And
he's going to make more.
But just remember, Boyle and Simmons weren't there all year. They were just acquisitions, right? So they were never in the plans.
No, they were rentals, pure rentals.
They were rentals.
And that's what I'm saying. So if I keep Subban and I can't keep Yossi, and I'm going to get the assets, I could fill a couple spots with Yossi and still sign a few players. If I keep Yossi, then I either have to trade Subban, trade one of my centers, and then I still have to fill 2 or 3 spots. It's a lot riskier to actually trade Subban, because Yossi, even though he may be their best defenseman, it's going to be hard to keep him, because let's say he asks for 11 by 8 and he doesn't want to budge. Okay. Do you think Nashville's paying him that?
No.
But they will know that before the draft, because they're going to negotiate with him, because they can sign him to the extension on July 1st, and they're going to want cost certainty. So if you see Subban traded, I will bet you bottom dollar that Yossi's agreed to a deal, and they just can't announce it until July 1.
So here's the other thing about, we're estimating that Yossi wants 8 by 11. And you just throwing the number out, Russ, just for whatever it's worth. Other than Turris, and I'll say that because I think it's a general consensus. I'm not a fan of Johansson's number, but I understand why it's there.
Right.
When is Poyle grossly overpaid for a deal? So I don't expect Yossi's going. I think he gets way below market.
Well, I was going to say this. I mean, Arvidsson's making $4.25, and that's a steal. But you got to remember, just like Florida, just like Tampa, just like Dallas, Tennessee is a no state tax state.
Yeah.
So you're talking, you could get Yossi for less than what Subban is making, because like Stamkos or Kucherov with Tampa, because he's been there all the time. I'm assuming he loves it there. And maybe that's why he took $4 million when he was on the verge of being a Norris Trophy caliber defenseman a few years ago. So he must like it. So I'm assuming he's going to get paid, but he's not going to break the bank. If he tries to break the bank, then Russ is exactly right. They probably trade him and keep Subban. But if I had to guess one way or the other, I think they're going to sign Yossi and trade Subban.
Well, let's for one more minute, let's talk about why wouldn't he try and break the bank? Does he feel like right now, even though Saros is a good goalie, is Nashville going to be the favorite to make it to the Stanley Cup next year? Probably not.
No.
So
but they're going to be a contender.
They'll be a contender, but is Nashville one of those teams now that while they're being a contender, they're going to have to wait on some of the younger players like Fabro and such to come of age to really be at full strength again?
Totally.
They might.
Yeah.
So with Yossi signing a deal, let's say it's with them, he might have to wait 2 or 3 years to get to the Stanley Cup again. If he gets there at all. If he gets there at all, right? Because we don't know if they'll get back.
But
so
he's not
– other teams – hold on. Are there other teams that would pay Yossi that could get to the Stanley Cup quicker in his estimation? There probably are.
But he's going to be 1 year away from being able to choose that, and more than likely, either they're going to keep him and then let him walk, or trade him because his value, right? And then he's not going to have any control where he goes. He could go to some team that's going to try just to make the playoffs, not be a Stanley Cup contender. Well, so I mean, it's not in his control.
So here's the thing: you take a look at the supposed two powerhouses of the Central, the Jets and the Predators. How much change needs to happen to each team in the offseason here? And I have this theory that unless you're sort of a team with elite players like a Crosby, or Detroit when they had Lindstrom and stuff, teams that lose the Stanley Cup final very rarely get back to it soon. It just doesn't happen. And if you go back and look at people who have been the runners up and stuff, it's a rarity to see them back in quickly again.
Tampa Bay in 2015, they haven't gotten back to the final since.
Yeah.
San Jose in 16, they haven't got back to the final.
Vancouver in 2011, and they won the President's Trophy the next year.
Right. So let's
Calgary in 2004, never got a sniff of it again.
Right.
Right. Like it doesn't happen very often.
But would the assets that you get from Yossi make it happen? It could.
Well, that's the point. So if you're a GM, such as in the situation of Poyle, particularly, because now they're trending down just based on results. It doesn't mean they can't trend up again.
Right.
Do you need to make moves to keep that trend to reverse that trend? And if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff and your salary cap window just kind of shut a bit because of what's going to happen on contracts, do you have to make significant changes given the way your season ended and the playoffs went? And I would say the teams that think they can tweak and fix what's there are probably not living in the real world.
And the question is, the question is, Russ, what deal do they get more value back in? Trading Yossi with 1 year left and no guarantee of being able to sign him to an extension, or trading for Subban with 3 years left, even though the cap hits $5 million more? I think they get more for Subban because there's 3 years. It's sort of like Erik Karlsson. San Jose. What did San Jose give up? They gave up Norris. They gave up a couple forwards, but
it's still a pretty good package. If you look at that package, it was still a good package.
But it wasn't like a oh my god, blow your doors off type of package.
No, but who's to say he won't choose a team that's not going to extend him that hasn't already going to be talked about on July 1st? Like that, I would think would be the way they would want to do it. Is let's send Yossi to a place if we can't afford him here, that he is going to want to sign a long-term with. This way we could get the maximum return for him. I just look at it and I say, right now, I think what Peter was saying was exactly what I was thinking.
Right.
On paper, Nashville looks like they should be there every year, but in reality, it's so hard to get back, as we're seeing. You know what? You might not want to dig that deep a hole with Yossi because you have a good enough defense. You have everything else. You're just piling it on at this point, and maybe you should, if you can get him cheap, look, if you can get him at Subban's price, then it's a done deal, right? Then it's no problem. But if he doesn't want that and he wants maximum of everything, I got to look at that and say, you know what? That may not be in best interest of the club.
And those are the questions that we're going to talk about during the late spring and during the playoffs and in the summer about these teams before the draft and before free agency, about what they do to adjust. I mean, we won't talk about Toronto right now, but if they lose tonight, then there's going to be a lot of question about, okay, who do you move out? How do you change things? How do you create cap space? Is it Nylander? Is it Kadri? You let, all these things, all these machinations will come to the forefront if they lose. So we won't talk about that in length because we don't know what's going to happen right now. Calgary, who we sort of looked over yesterday, they lose to Colorado. That was a bit shocking. I think everybody realized that their goaltending was a problem going into the playoffs. And, even though Mike Smith faced 50-plus shots in a couple games, Russ, you pointed out when we had our text discussion going back and forth that in that deciding game, he didn't make the big save at the big time. The goaltending ended up really costing them.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't go to the blue paint like Fleury did to keep his team alive, even though they ended up losing that game. He made some of those saves. Martin Jones made some of those saves. Smith had some good saves, don't get me wrong, but he didn't have one of those. And they needed one of those. Like, they were in trouble. And so I feel like going into next year now, I hope Mike's not frozen, but it seems like he is, Peter.
Yeah.
No, okay, he's good. I hope for them they go and get a goalie. But right now, this is a problem that has plagued this team now for a few years. And Parsons is the one that got a call up. So I guess Gillies will be on the way out. Maybe they'll deal him somewhere. Maybe he will do something for someone else.
Right.
But Parsons isn't ready. So they need that middle goalie, like we've talked about with a lot of teams, for a couple of years. And so now they're gonna have to shop because Rittich isn't going to be their guy. Clearly, Peters didn't want to use him. Smith is clearly not the guy. He's never been the guy. So they have to do something about that, whether it's via trade or go sign, some other goalie in free agency.
I mean,
that's a curious question, Russ. Why? What changed for Peters in regards to his view of Rittich? What made that change?
Yeah, we don't know. Nobody knows.
Down the stretch. Experience. So he went with Smith. Look, Smith played in the playoffs like he was playing for his career, even though that he got lit up. I mean, there were some games that he was beyond stellar, right? And sure enough, it didn't work out. But if he liked it in Calgary, he believes in the team, would you be surprised if he signed again and then played maybe a 1A, 1B kind of role? Would that even be in the scenario? Because who's out there that they're going to get to?
It's in the scenario, but I think that's also the definition of crazy.
Well,
because you already know who's
available
last time.
Here are some of the short-term options. Varlamov in free agency.
Who I think is an upgrade to both of them still. Not a big one.
Corey Schneider.
No, okay.
And there's not Braden Holtby with a year left if they want to go with Samsonov, Corey Crawford in Chicago.
Maybe they try and trade for Crawford. Well, how about that?
Well, you could try and sign Bobrovsky.
Well,
yeah,
they could.
I love the scenic view of downtown Calgary. Yes. Okay.
What about bringing in Talbot?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. What if they got into a bidding war with the Flyers and Talbot? Like Talbot.
Elliott.
Well, you know who else is a UFA?
I'm bringing back Brian Elliott.
I don't know if he'd go, but you know who else is a UFA? I didn't realize this. I just pulled up a search now. Leonard.
Yeah, but everybody's taking it for granted he's going to re-sign with the Islanders, but you never know. I mean, if they get into the Bobrovsky sweepstakes, then maybe that changes.
Yeah, but if they've got Greiss, they're going to, can they pay Leonard and then have Greiss as a backup who is just as capable as Leonard this year?
Yeah, they're going to have to. I mean, they look, that's what they did with DiPietro for a while. They had a lot invested in goaltending. They're low to the cap, so they can do that.
If Eck was the coach, we know they'd keep Greiss. But
But you know what? I mean, short of getting another young goalie, like if they traded for Georgiev with the Rangers or something like that, they're going to have to get somebody with experience. I don't know. Would they even try and get Ryan Miller? I don't know.
I don't think Miller's would go up there.
Well, how about this? If
still Boston, sort of in the West, isn't it?
If Boston loses tonight, there's always been a lot of talk about the Bruins trading Tuukka Rask, making $7 million.
Yeah, I think that would, if they could trade for Tuukka Rask, I think they would do it in a heartbeat. I don't think Boston will do that, though. I think that's just the fans talk.
Yes. Now,
what do you trade if you're Calgary?
Would Halak be an upgrade to Calgary? It probably would at this point.
No, I think their problems are.
What does Peter think about that?
Okay.
Well, Halak, I don't know. I mean, if you can do a 1A, 1B, the problem is Calgary doesn't have cap space. Well, I mean, they sort of do, but not well, no, they're not bad, actually. I mean, Bennett's an RFA. I mean, it remains to be seen what's going to happen there.
I think he's upgraded. I do.
Yeah, I agree with you. So you add Smith back in, their cap space, you add anyone in, they're going to lose some cap. I mean, they can do it, but man, they got to be careful.
Well, I mean, this is the picture going into next year. Brody is a UFA after next season. Hamonic is a UFA after next season. Now they have
Mark Stone.
Sorry,
Mark Stone is. And Michael Frolik.
Michael Stone, yeah.
Michael Stone.
But they have young defensemen coming. Anderson is with them. Yeah. Shillington is with them. Valimaki is with them. So they have youngsters on the blue line that maybe they would consider moving on from one of the guys or trading one of those guys to open up cap space. Where I think they're in trouble in terms of the salary cap is Matthew Tkachuk. They have their core group all locked up, and I'm sure they would love to dump James Neal on somebody.
Yeah. I mean, that's the deal that's going to kill them.
We talked about it. We didn't understand it.
Yeah, no one did.
But again, okay, so looking at the Neal deal, though, that was based on experience, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So based on what Peters went with in the playoffs here, he was going with the goalie with experience, not necessarily the better one. So my feeling is get a really good goalie on the market, give him and Rittich the split, and you'll be in better shape next year than you will be this year. But they're going to have to get somebody or trade for somebody. You can't go with the same two guys again. I think that would be insanity.
And they're going to have to find some way to clear some space to sign Tkachuk because Tkachuk is going to probably demand – I mean, if it's a bridge deal, he's probably going to ask for probably $6 to $7 million at least.
Yeah, he'll do what Mark Stone did on his bridge.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting summer for the Flames. Definitely. I mean, I think they had a great regular season, but there were some fatal errors with that team that just made a run in the playoffs very unlikely, and it turned out to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll be interesting to watch, and and then you think about with Alberta too. We're expecting a whole heap of things to happen with the Oilers.
Yeah,
if they can make anything happen. With all these upsets, right, and things that have changed when the playoffs. Then some of the stuff that's going on with some teams that you expect to be active, particularly like the Canucks, the Oilers, even Montreal as well. The offseason is shaping up to be super interesting because are there going to be a couple GMs who not panic, but react strongly to what happened in the first round of the playoffs?
Yeah, I think there will be.
And inevitably there is, and maybe there's some stuff that happens that we just don't even see coming.
Well, it's funny because we always say, well, the draft has become the trade deadline, and there's a lot of hunger out there to make moves. This is going to be. Well, when all these upsets happen, I think that there are going to be a lot of general managers who want to shake the apple cart, and they want to they'll stir up their rosters because they bowed out. I mean, we know Tampa is going to stir up their roster because they got to open up space for Braden Point. They got to clear money to sign him, and I think they have defensemen that are older and leaving or on UFA deals, and maybe they bring one or two of them back on short-term contracts. But I think after losing in 4 straight and being the biggest playoff shocker in recent history, there's a desire probably there on Julian Brisebois to shake things up a little bit.
I think what the draft is for the GMs, it's a flea market.
Yes.
What they do is they show up there and they start floating a lot of their names.
Yes.
Just to see what the interest is. A lot of times these trades don't happen, but sometimes they do because they don't, maybe they didn't realize how much interest another team has in one of their players and what they'd actually give.
Yeah,
and I think there's going to be quite a few teams, I think, talking up guys and trying to see what's out there before they get to the table. I do think that that's going to occur.
Yeah,
I mean, Tampa has to make changes because their salary situation is not sustainable.
Yeah, and like I just as an example to what Russ is talking about, the word out in Buffalo right now, and has been out there since the end of the season, is that the guy that they're going to move is Ristolainen, which we've heard the last 2 years. But I think there's genuine momentum, especially coming off a season where they completely crash dive the last 3 months of the regular season, and there's a desire for change. And if they hire Chris Taylor, their American Hockey League coach, or they go out and hire Rickard Gronberg, the Swedish coach, that's not exactly a big splashy move to appease the fan base in Buffalo. And I could see them potentially moving a Ristolainen, a right-hand defenseman, under contract for a few more years if they get the value that they need. So I think those type of guys could get moved. Now in terms of Edmonton, I'll go flashback to what Eck talked about on the weekend. His, apparently Mark Hunter, the former assistant GM of the Leafs, has had 2 interviews in Edmonton. There's some speculation that if he is hired, maybe could he hire his brother Dale as the head coach? That's possible. But there's a lot of talk about DJ Smith, the Leafs current assistant coach, who was a finalist apparently for the Ottawa job when Guy Boucher got it. Might still be in the mix for Ottawa if they haven't filled their coaching spot right now. Russ, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to rip Mark Hunter because I think he did a pretty good job for what he did in Toronto. But he's not what I think Edmonton should be looking for, which is somebody, he's a neophyte. He's not an NHL general manager. He never has been.
Right. If you're getting Mark Hunter, no matter what the title you want to give him, make up a title. If you're having him run your draft, get Mark Hunter.
Yeah.
If you're getting him to be your complete GM, don't get Mark Hunter. I mean, I think it's that simple. And I think that's where they have to sort of make up their mind. If you get Mark Hunter, nobody else gets input. Like, that's it. It's his draft. He talks to the scouts. It doesn't matter what the 3 or 4 or 5 of the other guys on the hierarchy think. It doesn't matter what the owner thinks. You have to let him actually run the draft.
Well, that's the thing, because could this be a compromise situation where Mark Hunter goes in there and says, the draft is mine, the scouts are mine, everything is mine in that respect, but I'll take the input of the alumni for trades or for free agency or something. If that's the compromise, then it's a recipe doomed to fail.
Right.
If Mark Hunter has to go in and have Paul Coffey walk down the hallway, or Kevin Lowe or Wayne Gretzky, and sit there and waste his time listening to, well, we need a guy who can do what we did back in '85, really bring it up the ice quick. And so, Hunter would, I would sit there and go, you know what, Paul? You were an awesome player in your day. You were fueled on Bolivian marching powder. How do you want me to match that?
We need a 21st century Charlie Huddy. Go on, him.
It's it's not just doomed for failure. It's doomed for comedic gold for the rest of the hockey world for years. One of the things Mike Gillis, rumored to talk to Edmonton, and there was rumors that they didn't want him as well. Like, things seeped out, which is, again, if you're having this information seep out and you're just in your exploratory hiring process, you've already got a problem.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he came in, he said he wasn't going back to a team until he wasn't going to a team until that team presented itself that was ready for change and knew it from the top to the bottom. So the situation had to be, not because he wasn't speaking about himself as some sort of grandmaster genius, but that's the way the NHL is going, and you have to have an organization aligned to the same goal. That is not the Edmonton Oilers. So Mark Hunter or Ron Hextall could be as regimented, and if they want, but if Daryl Cates is not going to put the alumni where they should be, which is in the press box, which is in a luxury box, shaking hands with fans like they do in Chicago, then you're doomed.
All right, so let's look at this 2 ways. So I've been around Mark Hunter a little bit to sort of see how he operates just at a draft, and in talking to other people and stuff. I've been in the same area as him, and He's a very intelligent guy, but he definitely wants to do it his way.
Yes.
And so that's why I say he would probably come in with like, hey, this is my draft kind of thing, and they would have to do that. I don't know if they would do that. Now, Ron Hextall, there is still that thing with him and the Flyers alumni where they got mad at him because he wouldn't let him use a locker room for one of their games. He apologized for that. So he would probably be nicer to the alumni this second go-round, but with everything else, he's not going to be. He's going to be, listen, this is the way I do it. This is what I know. This is what happened, and this is what I can do for your franchise. If you want to do this, then hire me. If not, he probably doesn't want any part of it. And so it does all come down to Cates.
And even a bigger problem, Hextall was a Flyers alumni, not a legend, but he's part of the group. Hunter is not. So
Right.
That's going to immediately rub things the wrong way, and that if he does get hired. So this is something that if he honestly he wants to get into the NHL as a general manager, I get it. If you're going to take a job with strings, I get it. That is the biggest cluster F in the league. I would not want to tackle it. But if you want to get into the league as a general manager, there are only 31 jobs right now. So from his point of view, I understand it. Okay. 2 games tonight.
He doesn't have to. We should point that out. Mark Hunter doesn't have to have the job.
No.
He's already got a job.
Yes. He's part owner and general manager of the London Knights. He can pick and choose. His reputation in Toronto for being the guy who drafted Marner, drafted Dermott. I could have drafted Austin Matthews, so I was able to walk up. But so Timothy Liljegren. So his reputation is pretty good. And he's even going back to junior with the Knights, his reputation is sterling. He has a good hockey mind. So okay, 2 games tonight, 2 game 7s. We'll start with the one on the West Coast first. Vegas, after 59 shots and losing in double overtime in Game 6, visits San Jose. Russ, I heard them on Hockey Central this morning talking about, it's on Martin Jones's back. I don't think it's on Martin Jones's back. Let's say he's got to play well, and he did play well in Game 6. But I really think this is on the back of Logan Couture, on Pavelski, and
all the veterans.
All the veteran guys.
I agree. It's all the veterans that stepped up last game. Joe Thornton doesn't know if this is his last series. Erik Karlsson's probably not going to re-sign there and doesn't know when the next time he'll get a chance to advance far in the playoffs. Like, that's what this is all riding on. Erik Karlsson's playing for his next contract. So, that's a pretty big deal in and of itself. Jones just has to be Jones, and I think he was good last game. I know people will probably say, well, has he had 2 good in a row? I don't know. You know what? It really does come down to their defense and the way they play, and I do think with their veteran leadership, I think they're going to win because I think they're going to play a better brand of hockey than Vegas, because I think at the end of the day, neither team's going to want to make those mistakes, and they're more set up defensively to make fewer mistakes than Vegas. Vegas will keep the shots low, so everybody wants to tell me how few shots the Sharks have. That's great, but the big scoring chances, the Sharks will get a few of those, and if they bury them, they're going to win the game. And so I do like the Sharks in this one. I'm not discounting Vegas because their top line's fantastic. Yeah. And they have a lot of really good players. But, again, William Karlsson is pretty easy to contain these days. He's nowhere near where he was last year. They're 3 defensemen deep. I don't know if they're even 4 defensemen deep. So if you get them late in the third period, you probably have a little bit of an advantage there. Fleury's great. But Fleury, even last game, was even with only facing whatever the total was, but I think he made 29 saves. Yeah. He was getting a little tired by the end. He was. And so right now, I think that this is looking good for the Sharks because the Shark Tank is a great home ice advantage. One of the best ones in the NHL.
And we still don't really know because Fleury was out like 2 to 3 weeks near the end of the season. They played Malcolm Subban a lot. We don't really know specifically what the injury was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that could lead to, he's in double overtime. He hasn't faced a ton of shots, but he's still in double overtime, which is playing 100 minutes, almost 100 minutes. And, that tires out anybody. But if it's somebody who's laboring because of an injury, then that's that makes it even worse. Now, Peter, you've seen both of these teams more often than Russ and I have. I've watched the series a little bit, but sometimes it's tough to stay up. I did stay up for the double overtime game, and, Vegas impresses me in that number one line. Stastny, Pacioretty, and Stone are really, really, really good. But as we said before, their defense is not as deep, and if it's head to head, I think that San Jose is a little better than them, obviously on the blue line. But what do you think? What do you think is going to happen tonight?
Well, I mean, from a pool standpoint, I certainly want San Jose. I think the issue that San Jose has to worry about is they have to find a way to clog up the Vegas attack. Like when Vegas gets rolling, they're a steam engine coming through the neutral zone. You just can't slow them down. And they've got to find a way to clog that up a little bit. I don't think it's sustainable to let Martin Jones see that volume of shots every game. And I think, just as much, like, look, Fleury wants that OT goal from Hurdle back, and he wants it back 1,000 times over.
Right.
But Martin Jones wants a few goals back too in this series. Mm-hmm. And you've got a higher probability of having Martin Jones whiff something like that if you keep allowing that many shots. And that's where San Jose's got to improve. I think the home ice, also because of matchups, will certainly help San Jose if they're smart about how they see this. You want to make sure you have the right pairings and the right forward group against that top line of Vegas, because you just don't want to let those guys wind up. They're deadly. So you got to find ways to deal with that. And hopefully that's what happens. I think San Jose can win this, but it's going to require they're going to have just as much desperation in this as Vegas is too.
Yeah.
And I think Vegas knows how to sort of play a more desperate and sort of free hockey to win than San Jose does.
Here's the bigger question, and this is really a conspiracy theory. Ever since last April, we have not seen any coverage on the Marc-Andre Fleury giant-sized chocolate sculpture at the Bellagio. You could search the internet. I have not seen a recent picture. This is 90 pounds of chocolate on the lamb. I don't know if it's still in the hotel. I don't know if it melted after losing in the cup last year. I don't know what's happened, but I'd really like to find out what happened to this 90-pound giant's life-size chocolate sculpture of Marc-Andre Fleury. I think people listening right now, they need to let us know, take a picture. I need to know if this is still around or not. It's important.
I'm trying to remember what Golden Corral with the it was sold the
chocolate fountain.
Chocolate fountain.
The most unsanitary thing they've ever put on.
It's like pumping liquid mud.
Oh.
Anyway, so that's where it went, Russ. But that'll be an extremely entertaining game. But the game before that one at 7:00 tonight will be.
There's no game before that one.
Yes, there is. The extremely.
No, you've already decided the outcome. There's no other game.
Well, I have, but not everybody else has. So we'll talk about it, even though I think I know what's going to happen, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs going to their Hall of Horrors, the TD Garden in Boston, to play Game 7 against the Bruins, the place that they lost in Game 7 6 years ago, the place where they lost in Game 7 last year, the place where they could have avoided playing if they had won in Game 6 in Toronto on Sunday, but they'd lost. So now they go, and Mike Babcock is very careful to say history doesn't matter. It's the here and the now. We just have to go out and have fun and all this happy stuff. And he doesn't care. He doesn't give any kind of consideration to his fan base, which are basically, wearing colostomy bags in preparation for another collapse. A
nice picture you're painting there, Mike.
Yes. Well, no, yeah. I mean, honestly, it's like, the thing that I will take from this series, and I think I take right now without Game 7 being played, is that the Leafs, even though they were the underdog, even though most people expected Boston to win and predicted Boston to win, the Leafs took the lead in the series 3 times and squandered it all 3 times. Now, you can write that off as a team that's inexperienced and didn't know how to win when it counted, or you can count that as Boston was a veteran team that knew how to respond, and maybe it's a little of both. But it comes down to a one-game winner take all situation, Russ. And I mean, I look at this. Boston's more experienced. They're killing Toronto on special teams. Give me a scenario where you think Toronto can win.
Well, first I have to ask you, Pierre LeBrun reported that Mike Babcock, before he started the scrum, said, with a smile, you got to like this, right? Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like you're liking this.
No, there is nobody in Toronto that likes this. This is friggin' misery.
So that's my point.
You did not want, and let me just add this before you make your point. Mike Babcock has been blowing sunshine up the rear ends of the media and Toronto all series, telling them William Nylander's playing well, telling them all this positivity. No, I mean, I understand you can't be negative like me because I was born negative, but honestly, tell it like it is. William Nylander has played terribly in this series. Your power play and penalty killing, power play has gone 3 for 14. With Tavares, Marner, Matthews, Riley, who scored 20 goals this year, your power play has been remarkably ineffective for the talent that it has. The Bruins have scored 7 power play goals in 16 opportunities. Your penalty killing has been abysmal. You can't talk positive about this team when those things are present. Go ahead, Russ.
Right. So I think that Babcock does have it wrong. And I think that's a problem. I do. I think he's got the wrong idea about what fans want, what the team wants. I get that the Game 7 atmosphere is great. I don't know if he's really thinking about, because again, these coaches never really think about the downside of what happens when they lose a big game like this and what it does to their career, what it does to the team, to the GM, the changes. Like, he's living in the moment, right? Like my cat lives in the moment. And I don't think he's thinking about anything beyond that. But I think it's a problem.
What are you saying? Mike Babcock is looking for some meow mix?
I don't know. I mean, this is not the way this guy has coached, the way this guy has acted is not the Mike Babcock that I've covered before, and even as recent as last year. Like, this version of him is bad.
So, Russ, I think I agree with what you're saying. And I think the legend of Mike Babcock, born of a Detroit Red Wings team with generational all-stars and 2 gold medal teams of maybe one 2010, maybe arguably one of the top Canadian rosters ever assembled, is born of the idea that when he can always play someone who is at the top of their game, he's a genius. But so to that point, why not put Tavares on the penalty kill? Like,
why not make a lot of changes? But
why not make a bunch of things like that? You have nothing to lose anymore. So play the best guys.
Now hold on, Mike. You got to chill for a minute.
Well, no, and this is the point. Babcock decided from the very beginning that he was going to do certain things in certain ways. He was going to play certain players in certain situations, like Ron Hainsey on the top pairing with Morgan Riley, like playing Patrick Marleau 17 minutes in Game 6. He trusts certain players, and he sticks with, even if it's not working, it's a stubbornness in Babcock that a lot of people are annoyed by. He will not go with Tavares. I mean, he went away from playing Mitch Marner on the penalty kill, even though it was working, because he was playing him more 5-on-5 and playing him on the power play, and that killed them. They've given up 5 power play goals and 7 chances at Scotia.
This is what I would do if I were the coach of the Leafs, and I would have to get over being nauseous that I'm coaching the Leafs. But I would do it for the greater good, for all those Leaf fans out there.
Yes.
I would have phony line rushes. I would not put out the line that they give you in the press box that's starting the game. Boston knows everything that Mike Babcock is going to do.
Right.
He had, like I talked about the other day, he's got a very short list of players he could sub in.
Yeah.
He somehow thinks Freddie Gauthier is better than Nick Patan, which he's not. And so if you're the other team, you know what's going to happen, right? And the one thing that Boston has that's really going for them, everybody talks about all their great forwards, but what I saw the last couple of times that Boston had dominated was that Chara was dominating.
Yeah.
And
well, to
was dominate one more game.
To that point, I mean, this morning at the morning skate at TD Garden, they played in Patan in place of Zach Hyman on the line with Tavares and Marner because Hyman was getting treatment, but he came out right afterward and said Hyman's playing. So
yes, I mean,
like, okay, so it wasn't.
Why do you do that?
Right, because he's going to stick with what brung him,
and that's wrong. I'm telling you.
But we talked about this yesterday. Is the fact that they used up their 4 call-ups. All their reserves are defensemen. Because of Gardner and his injury and Dermott to a lesser extent, they had 2 backup forwards, Patan and Tyler Innes. Kadri gets suspended, and now they only have 1, and he's not going to play Nick Patan because he loves Freddie Gauthier's size on the 4th line.
And here's another thing, and again, this isn't brain surgery, but some teams are doing it now. We see it more in other sports, especially football. Why not open the game with like a play? Sometimes it works. We're seeing some teams get some pretty quick goals because they catch the other team off guard. How about the Leafs do something like that to be a little unpredictable for a team?
Yeah, I mean, how many teams do that? I mean, I'm not gonna.
A few, but I'm saying get out of the predictable zone because that is death in a game like this where Boston's already got the home ice, even though Marchand's complaining about it. And here's the funny thing about Marchand complaining about the home ice, Mike. Remember how when I used to talk about Grizzlick and his dad used to be the guy that runs the Zamboni at the Garden? He's still the guy who runs the Zamboni at the Garden. So then he had to answer for the ice because his idiot son's teammate had to criticize the ice. And he said, well, he's not taking it personally.
Well,
but you know
maybe Branch uses enormous proboscis as the Zamboni before Game 7. But
I'm just saying the Leafs, if they're predictable, they're going to lose this game because the Bruins know what to do now. They've done it a few times, and they will definitely do it on home ice. And you could watch Chara will definitely stand up a few guys early. He knocked down Marner the other day. He's going to knock down somebody else, whether it's Tavares. And he's going to try and set a tone. And honestly, even at this age, Chara can be that guy like Chris Pronger in one game that could spoil your game.
And Peter, I look at this game tonight, and again, I think they did it in Game 5 in a turning point game in the series where they came out early. The Leafs did. And it wasn't that they had to weather the early storm by Boston. They sort of took control, and that sort of set the trend for sort of an even matchup until the 3rd period. I think they're going to have to do that again because Boston's going to be filled with so much energy at the beginning of this game because they want to do what they did in Game 2. If you get a couple goals on them, they will run. They will run you over, and especially in a Game 7 situation, that's what they're going to try to do. If the Leafs survive that, then I think it's more of a chess match, and then one mistake might make the difference.
Right, like Vasily.
The best thing the Leafs can do is make sure the Boston doesn't run the game, right? Like, so you don't want to get into a chasing match with them up and down the ice. You don't want to try. Sure, you want to score goals. You want to score as many goals as you can, but you don't want to do it in a run and gun way because that's going to open up other problems for you.
Mm-hmm.
You want to slow the game down. You want to methodically get to work and just not let any kind of momentum or possession or control happen for the Bruins. And that takes all hands on deck. Like, just keep them off their game in all capacities. I mean, it sounds cliche, but that's really what they have to do.
And Russ,
here's a good example. Like, a lot of people in the chat room say, hey, Tavares could be your game changer in this game. Don't think the Bruins don't know that, and that's why I think Chara might be the guy that runs him early to sort of see what he's made of. And
one of the things that was suggested on the afternoon show that I'm sure, I don't know whether Babcock will avail himself of this opportunity, but in a Game 7 There should be no holds barred. I played Matthews 23, 24 minutes. I double shift him.
Yep.
Freddie Gauthier shouldn't play this game. They should play 7 defensemen, 11 forwards, and double shift Tavares and Matthews.
Give him 1 shift a period so guys get a little rest. I give Gauthier 1 shift a period. He shows me nothing. That's what he gets.
Yeah, but to my point, you've got your best players. He's been playing Marner over 20 minutes in almost every game. You play Tavares, you play Matthews over 20 minutes tonight. You create matchup problems. Because I'll tell you something right now. The impression is Bruce Cassidy has outcoached him.
Yeah,
this series. He's moved players in and out of the lineup to give him rest, or guys who have had injury problems. He's won the matchup battle after Babcock won it early in the series with Tavares and Marner against Bergeron. And you don't think that Patrice Bergeron or Krejci aren't going to double shift if Boston is losing in the 3rd period? One of them will be on the ice every single minute.
Here's the big question, Mike. Every series, whoever loses the series, we always look at it and say, who did the coach sort of overuse, right? So like in Tampa, it was Cirelli, right? I think he played 23 minutes. It was insane. Right. Who is the guy that shouldn't be getting overused here, but Babcock is going to overuse him if the Leafs lose?
It could be Marleau again. He used him 17 minutes. He did. It's strangely enough, and
he's on his last legs. It looks like.
Yeah, strangely enough, Ron Hainsey only played 16 minutes in Game 6, which to me either means he's hurt or he's worn down. But no,
Gardner playing.
Gardner's injured. He's playing like 15 minutes.
He's playing 15. Okay.
Yeah, I mean he's playing bottom pairing minutes. But yeah. I mean, really, the guy that they've overplayed, but they have to, because who else are they going to play? Is Nikita Zaitsev. He's the only right-hand shot defenseman, and he's playing 20 minutes with Muzzin, and they have to because they need somebody to play in the top 4. But I still don't think he's a top. See that this series exposes the thing that I've been talking about with the Leafs all year. You look at Boston and you look at Carlo, Krug, McAvoy, Chara, Grzelcyk as your top 5. And with the Leafs, with an injured Gardner, I think your 3rd best defenseman is Travis Dermott. Your 2nd best is probably Muzzin, and your number 1 is Riley. And then everybody else files in after that. And that's not – I mean, they could very well win the series tonight if Matthews puts them on their back, or if Tavares and Marner have a great night. But if they lose, the reasons for them losing were apparent for a long time.
I'm going to tell you, just because, you get gut feelings about stuff, and I had that gut feeling about LeBanc, and it didn't totally work out the other night. My gut feeling for this game is Sean Corrali. I just think for whatever reason, he is going to capsize the Leafs, because he'll be the guy that none of us are paying attention to. None of us are talking about. He's now back for like a 2nd game after his injury.
Yeah.
I could just see it happening.
He's fresh. I mean, he's playing with a broken hand or a recently repaired hand. Yeah. But as with many Game 7s, not to be cliche, but sometimes the guy, like I wrote about this in my blog today. In the last time the Leafs beat the Bruins was 1959 in Game 7 in Boston, and a journeyman guy who was a rookie, 26 years old, named Gary Eman, scored the goal for Toronto. He ended up playing for a number of teams for like 10, 11 years. But
Michael Rupp scored a game-winning Stanley Cup goal.
Right.
The whole building gasped when it was Michael Rupp when I was covering that game, because it was like, who?
Yeah. Had Toronto not choked in Game 7 in 2013, the hero of the series would have been Cody Franzen. He scored 2 goals for the Leafs. And last year, who scored 2 goals for Toronto in the first period? Patrick Marleau. But again, Boston.
The Leafs have a good chance here. I think they have a better chance than what you're saying in your mind. But it's just, I think this is a game where the Bruins can just prepare for the one game. Yes. Like, hey, don't worry about anything else. The Leafs have the most pressure on them. The Bruins don't have near as much pressure on them. And that's obvious.
I will not pay lip service like Mike Babcock. This is not something to enjoy. This game was something to dread. And if they survive, that's great. But as somebody who has watched this team for most of my life, I don't know anybody in their right mind, if you're up 3-2 in a series, that you're overjoyed to go to a Game 7. You're not. You won. You should have won that game, and you should have won that series in 6, like in 1990.
This is the Leafs are the only franchise in the NHL right now that if you said, at the start of the season, you get game 7, you get to play game 7 in the first round against Boston, or would you take that right now and not have to play the season? Everyone would have said no.
Right.
Right. Like that's the problem here. It's not, and it's not that it's the problem with for the players. It's that it's the only thing that's being talked about to the players and around the players. And because the fact that they had a series lead, they could have put it away at home and they didn't. It's only actually increased that pressure.
The problem for
now, Mike, you listen, and we talk a lot of Leafs on the show because you're the Leafs guy, but we have to talk a lot of Leafs on the show. That's a huge part of the audience. And as you've said, and to summarize it, the Leafs are an unbalanced team based on talent through the roster, elite in some areas and gaping holes in the other. And the GM hasn't filled it. And part of the plan has been to rely on Mike Babcock to be a coach that can compensate for those holes.
Right.
And it's not happening.
And even the best coach in the world cannot make chicken salad out of chicken bleep.
I look, and James makes a point. Like sometimes the Leafs do play better on the road. The problem is Boston still has players that won the Stanley Cup and know how to defend home ice. And that's really what their game plan is going to be, is just defend home ice for this one game where, like I was going to say, the Leafs are not playing with house money. The Leafs have all the pressure. Babcock may be acting fast and loose in this scrum. The scrum tomorrow will be pretty ugly if they lose tonight, or even the scrum tonight will be pretty ugly. And he'll be facing the Leafs media that he's never seen since he's been there as a coach. It will be back to the very disgruntled, very jaded Leafs media if they lose this game.
I don't know if they lose. I don't know whether locker cleanout will be Wednesday or will be Thursday. I'll be up there. I would bet significant money that Babcock will be asked about, his future in Toronto, which I don't think is in doubt. I think William Nylander will be asked about, what if this is your last game in Toronto, what is it going to, what do you want? What is your legacy of being, like those kind of questions, because there are going to be changes if they lose. So there is a lot of pressure for this current roster. Matthews is not going anywhere. I don't care what anybody says. Marner is not going to sign an offer sheet. The Leafs will pay him. There are going to be trades. There are going to be changes, but this is a big game. And, you can't say this team is inexperienced anymore. They've been in the playoffs 3 straight years. And I know that Boston is more experienced, but they are experienced enough to know what it takes to win in a game 7. And now it's a question of whether they can just go out.
Like somebody just said, I hope Marleau scores a big goal. He probably hopes that too. He doesn't have a goal. He's got 2 assists.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I don't doubt is that Patrick Marleau is going to try his utmost. He's but it's just a question of whether, like David, the Bruins have the ability to move David Backes in and out of the lineup because they have extra bodies. They had, they inserted a young rookie like Carson Kuhlman, added some speed, got guys back from injury. The Leafs don't have that luxury. They have 13 forwards and they're not going to play the 13th one. So Marleau is going to be out there every game and he's going to be out there tonight, and whether he makes a difference or not, we will see. But okay.
Marleau still has the snow tires on, but right now it's no longer winter. And it's a problem.
All right.
We'll say that for Canadians that could relate to that. Anyhow.
We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.